I can speak for Iceland, and I absolutely think the system like it is here today has nothing to do with democracy. The country is controlled by political parties, and they have their own agenda, which has not very much to do with the good of the general public, which democracy should be about.
The way we have done democracy up till now, that system simply doesn't have the legitimacy it had before the crash.
After the financial collapse of 2008, there was a very strong social upheaval. There was a very strong feeling that we were somehow at the end of a regime. Instead of responding with anger and going to protests and making a lot of noise, there were also very many people that were thinking that, we don't need protest or anything to bring this system down. It's collapsing on its own. What we need to think about is, what are we going to do next?
And I think it's a really good text, but now it's in the hands of the parliamentarians, and it's very important that we will help each other to do one thing, which is very, very, very seriously important. And I'm going to allow myself to be completely sincere, because this is seriously important.
The university in Iceland failed massively. I was in university when everything crashed, studying law, and I was being taught by some teachers how to evade taxation. Teaching little lawyers how not to pay tax was happening in our university, and the university is paid by taxpayers' money. There were people that tried to speak out to say, listen, we're going here in the wrong direction, but they were laughed at, and they were ridiculed, and they were not listened to.
I think education is somewhat overestimated, and it was also in this constitution, most of us were very educated. I would have preferred to see maybe nurses or taxi drivers or sailors, more of people who are working in the ground, because most of the nation are working on the ground.
There is a war between the people who own the world, the people who control the world, and the rest of the people, the masses, the people that in some cases feel like they have nothing, they have no say in anything.
I'm a member of the Parliamentary Assembly to NATO, and in my committee on last session there was a report on cybercrime, and it was based on WikiLeaks and Anonymous and various other threats. After the report was introduced, the person responsible for it said that they had drawn the line where cyber crimes or warfare would be considered an act of war, so they could send in the real world war up against it. And I asked, where is this line? And they said, we don't want to tell, because those that want to use the internet for that sort of purposes will go to the boundaries of this line that we have.
The crash, it was not just because of circumstances in the world. It was also because of circumstances here in Iceland, and I would call these circumstances corruption.
The banks had become bankrupt way before, but they had been collecting money from Holland and Great Britain through these iSave accounts. And when everything collapsed, these debts became the debts of the Icelandic public, which is completely unfair. And if we think about it, this whole banking system is incredibly stupid. I don't understand how this can still be going on. I think if Europe would have any sense, they would close down the banks and start all over again and say, if you're going to borrow 1 krona, you have to have it. You cannot just invent it.
At the same time, they owned the media. So we were in a situation, that we were not being told the truth. The media it was not the thing what they were saying, but not what they were not saying,
Everything is very hidden. It's very difficult to have real numbers about anything. It's difficult to have answers about anything. It was difficult when the right-wing government here and everything collapsed. And now with a left-wing government, it's even more difficult.
It's the system of having every 4 years the possibility to vote for different parties that turn out all to be more or less the same when they get into power. It's just totally not working.
Example, we are having people here standing in a food line. Why are we having that? And the finance minister, he was taking about almost 15,000 millions Icelandic crowns and put it into one small bank in Keflavik. The bank was bankrupt. Why didn't the finance minister just let this bank be a private-owned bank? Just went bankrupt. Why was he taking 15,000 millions from the people and put into this bank and having these people standing in food line? It's corruption.
During the protests, people were generally very negative towards IMF, but now IMF is doing what they like to, and the government that was voted for being against IMF, they are doing what they want them to do.
Að standa í brúnni, vera formaður ykkar á þessum sögulegu tímamótum.
You always start with yourself. It sounds very egocentric, but it's not. Because I believe I'm fighting for a better life for myself. And if I start doing that, all the other people who also want to do it, they come. Politics. There are when a system is the same system for decades, it means there are the same power people, same power groups, families, and they don't want to change the situation.
I'm not saying all political parties are evil or bad, but I think what they do is they give people the chance to not think. You just think, okay, I will put my ex here with this hurt people and trust them. And it's not a great idea, because we have to think by ourselves, and if you just decide to outsource your participation in society and democracy to other people, you are betraying your society, I think. So I think they become little mafias, unfortunately, and they start just thinking about how they can maintain themselves and how they can maintain more power and how they can get their people to the right places and stuff like that.
Since the crash in 2008, up to about 50% of the voters would like to vote some other party which they haven't seen, just anything else other than the old political parties, or they would turn in an empty vote or wouldn't want to vote. The parliament has had, they haven't even reached 10% trust. About 9% of Iceland trust the parliament. In a recent poll, the majority of Icelanders thought that the elected officials in parliament were looking more after the interests of the banks than the homes or citizens in general.
We are not good enough consumers, and that has to do with general consuming and also democratic consuming. people tend to forget very quickly what the political parties are about and what they have done in the past. They're sticking with them like football teams, like fans of football clubs. And that's really something that we have to learn not to do.
I've seen lots of good people with good intentions going into a political party, and because they have this really, really good thing they want to work on, and in a couple of years they are suddenly agreeing to all sorts of really stupid things because they've realized that that's the only way that they can get their good thing across in that party.
I would never ever go into politics because I don't want my soul to become corrupted and evil. I mean, I was willing to do this constitution because it was a limited time, only 4 months, and I believe that I could go in and out and still be a relatively normal person. Democracy does is try to distribute the power as much as possible, to try to let each individual carry as little power as possible, so they will come as little corrupted as possible.
Example, if you have about 10 kids on the age from 6 to 8 years old, and you put them into the room and you put some chocolate cake on the table, and you say to the kids, you have to leave the cake alone, but I have to go outside of the room for a half hour. What's happened? But if you would sit in there with the kids and say, you're not allowed to eat the cake, leave it alone, and what's going to happen? The kids are going to leave the cake. They are not going to eat it because you are in there.
If there was a illness, a cancer, and you could decide if you would give the cancer to one person and they would probably die, or you would distribute it to 100 people and they would just be a little injured, and they would not die. It would be much better to do that, to distribute it to more people and to let them suffer less. So I think it's similar with power. It's like if people would stop looking at power as something like really good and something that they want, and start looking at it as like a disease or something they don't want, I think it would be much more interesting and much more normal chemistry towards it, But it's being mixed up with greed. It's the worst combination ever. If people want to, we can have financial crisis every 50 years and go to hell and come back and go to hell and come back. Each generation can suffer the same pain if they want to, or we could decide that we don't want to and change something, but then it has to be fundamental change and philosophical. It's not enough to just say, okay, new people in the same game. No.
The citizens movement was a project that was brought together by many groups in the grassroots that had been very dissatisfied since the collapse, and they got together. And those groups that felt it right that we should start an official party, register it, and go all the way to elections. Those groups became then the citizens movement. And it was officially started, I think, in the end of March 2009 with our collapse in October 2008. And those groups had been discussing for a very long time, trying to find what are our mutual focuses, our mutual policies, our mutual goals, our mutual vision, what unites us.
We had to think very quickly. We were all, saying no in the beginning. Never go to politics, and nobody wants to be an MP in Iceland. We wanted to change things, not be a part of them. I think the society, in a way, pushed us to make something for them, which was the civic movement. But afterwards, I think we had too little time, because we worked very effectively in the civic movement when we started, to the election, but after the election there was no plan B. What are we going to do if we get elected? In the beginning we didn't want this pyramid model for the party. This wasn't a party, it was a movement. So we wanted to all be equal. So it was no leader. We didn't want one leader to lead us, because we wanted all to be leaders. We came from everywhere. We had people who were left parties and right parties and middle parties and anarchists all together. And people could run if they want to run. We had like 16 names on a list. We wanted a man, woman, man, woman. We want people to be equal to run. And if two people want to be number one on a list, they have to throw something, a coin. Which one of you are going to be in the first? And then we had a woman after him, and then, and it was easy.
Góðan dag og verið velkomin í þennan loka hnykk á kosningavöku hér í sjónvarpinu.
Borgarahreyfingin fékk 7,2% og 4 þingmenn. Frjálslyndi flokkurinn fékk 2,2% og tapaði þeim 4 sem hann fékk kjörna árið 2007. Sjálfstæði flokkurinn fékk 23,7%, 16 þingmenn tapaði 9. Framsóknarflokkurinn fékk 14,8%, 9 þingmenn vann 2.
The mutual policy that the citizens movement formed around was, like I said, threefold. It was to make sure that those responsible for the economic collapse were held responsible. So court cases, etc., etc. Number 2, helping the homes of this country by doing it fairly, doing it in such a way that when the government, for example, knew that things were going wrong, that the banks knew the things that were going wrong. And we know this, and this is on record, that the loans that had been mutated, but they grew by leaps and bounds because of the collapse, that would be corrected back, for example. Third was to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Then that would be that we would have a new constitution and changes of the law.
Háttvirtur 10. þingmaður Suðurkjördæmis, Margrét Tryggvadóttir, sem talar af hálfu hreyfingarinnar.
Now the trick that has made it possible for us to be activists still inside the parliament and never forget our mission is there are 3 very important elements. One is that in the agenda, in the agreement we did with the nation, we promised we would only exist for 8 years max. And every time we have a meeting, a general meeting with people that are part of the movement, we have to ask if it's time to dissolve. Because if it's obvious that we are not achieving anything, or if we've finished our checklist, we have to dissolve. We don't have leaders, and that's very important. So we rotate responsibilities, and it leaves us, makes us free from the prima donnas that feel that they are the most important people. We are all equally important. The third ingredient is that nobody that has been involved in politics, be it a parliamentarian or in the youth movement, were allowed to run.
We were all amateurs, and I think that was the good thing about us, that we were not politicians, and we are still not consider ourselves like politicians. And according to the constitution of Iceland, you should follow parliamentarians, should just follow its own confidence. That is the only claim that is put on a parliamentarian. Some of the people in the civic movement said, well, no, we don't agree on that. We want to be asked how we want to be in control of the parliamentarians, and so the parliamentarians cannot vote on how they want to do. It was inevitable that the movement split or the parliamentarian split from the civic movement, because it was established in such a rush, and there were so many points that were not discussed beforehand on how we were going to work.
jafnaðarvinni. Vil ég bjarta framtíð með besta flokknum eða vil ég tortíma Reykjavík? Ókeypis handklæði öllum sundstöðum. Bestasti flokkurinn. Ísbjörn í Húsdýragarðinn. Besti Reykjavík. Alls konar fyrir aumingja. Hver þessi lífið? Disneyland í Vatnsmýri. Kerfið svo fíkni efnalaust Alþingi 2020.
We had some elections in the municipalities, and everywhere there were new parties forming and running, and they always came everywhere when they were the new people got into the city councils or town councils.
Well, the Best Party was a relatively new idea when the founder and our current mayor, Jón Gnarr, sent me a message on Facebook and asked me if I wanted to join. And I said, sure, what do I have to do? And he said, nothing, it's just going to be fun. Most of the people in the Best Party are artists and worked as such before we got elected. I can say that every single single person of the Best Party is a very common, regular person. None of us had any political background, so everything was new to us. About a month after the election, I realized what had happened. We kind of took the city and ourselves, I think, by storm.
ALDA, the Association for Democracy, was born out of a frustration. There were a group of people, myself included, who were frustrated with that the new government which took over after the crash in 2008 weren't making any changes to the system. They were following the IMF, they were you could say that they were readjusting and reconstructing and re-establishing the same system that was before. A lot of people hoped that they would change the system both economically and politically and allow for more democratic participation and direct democracy. But we weren't seeing any changes. So a group of people came together and started the association to find ideas of how we can make our society more democratic, not ideologically, but in practice. We needed to find real examples out in the world which have been tried and tested. One of the clear demands of the pots and pan revolution in 2009 was that there should be a constitutional assembly. One of the first things that we did in ALDA was to create a group that would make special proposals for the constitutional assembly or constitutional council. One of the examples was that we thought that a part of the elected representatives in parliament should be selected randomly from the general public. And we based it on an experiment in British Columbia in Canada, where they selected 160 people randomly from the general public to create and put forth a new election law. Randomly selected representatives are more likely to look to the general public, look for the greater good. They are not as likely to be trying to look for special interests or working for other groups or corporations. They're simply part of the general public. I think people are very much aware of that there are some things definitely wrong about the economic system and the political system. The problem is, and what we need to do to change the situation and get people more integrated into the discussion about societal issues, is that we need to create decision-making processes, we need to create forums, we need to create channels for people to get their ideas into the system.
A real democracy is not about having a referendum every month or ongoing where you just look at something and say yes and no. If we would go only by that, then we would have a really dangerous system, because then we would have something that the people would not be bothered to check out the facts, to check out the best points for and against. People would just go and say yes, no, because they saw on the television or they saw in the newspaper that that was the way to go. We are the Citizen Foundation in Iceland. It's a non-profit organization which has its main objective to connect the people with the people in power, to make the people in power listen to the normal people, the normal citizen. Before the last municipal election in Reykjavik, we started a new website called Better Reykjavik. That was a success. What happened there was that we got more people participating, and we also had a new political party that felt that a system like this was really something that would help them in deciding what would be their main issues if and when they got into power. One thing that is probably really important is that we were addressing issues that were much closer to people, not the big governmental issues which people have been told they can't understand because it's so complicated, and also people have been told indirectly is that you don't have anything to say in that except every 4 years. We're talking about the wisdom of the crowd. We're talking about that if you have many people addressing a problem, and if you have the infrastructure, if you have a system for doing that properly, then no one person can know better than that crowd. We need to have a system where people are actively participating in the decision-making, and not only decision-making, but also in finding out beforehand what are the main issues. What is the thing that matters most to you yourself, and therefore to the society as a whole. We need to find out from the arguments, is this the correct priority? And if so, how can we, from those best arguments, how can we do a working plan? How can we make a plan how to implement this? How to change it from a simple idea plus arguments into a working plan which preferably everybody can agree on, but practically speaking, hopefully 80-90% of the people can agree on this is the way we want to go.
The constitution that we have now in Iceland is a Danish constitution, an old Danish constitution that was given to us when we got our independence, and it was always supposed to be a temporary constitution for us. The basic idea about the constitutional society is that the people should write their own constitution, not the ruling government. This field was dominated by the politicians and the academics. We decided very quickly that we were not going to take any stand. We were not going to say that this amendment is right or this is wrong or anything. We just wanted people to start talking about it, and that was, I think, a really wise decision. We had always the threat of doing this ourselves, but the roots of this is that the ruling power has never wanted to change the constitution, so they they really needed a little push in the right direction, and we tried to be very polite but very pushing in all our methods. If the Icelandic general public would write a constitution by itself, who is a government to say that that is not the right constitution? People were really given the possibility of participating in all this process. All of a sudden, thousands of comments started pouring in, and the good thing about this is, of course, not only that the general public showed interest, but that the committee really listened to what came in there, and answered all the comments, and it was quite a pleasure to follow.
What we did in the Constitution Council, we decided with 25 people with totally different backgrounds and very different views, we were going to find the solution we could all live with. We were not going to find the solution most people wanted and just like run over the minority. So we talked and talked and talked and talked, and we talked to each other with respect. We weren't trying to find out, but you are contradicting yourself because before you said this, blah, 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 always attacking. We said no to that, because this is warfare politics, and this doesn't, like, if you want a peaceful society, you have to be the change, and you have to work in peaceful matters, and you have to find a way to approach every project with such respect that you're not going down to the level you're trying to eliminate. It was really difficult in the beginning, because we had like our ideas and we felt, oh, they're so imperfect, how can we put them online that people are going to say, what are you doing? But it was completely the opposite, and we learned that you can trust the people, and all of a sudden there were like thousands of people writing the Constitution together, which was very beautiful. I was in the area of human rights and natural resources and rights of the nature and environmental protection. And that's two of my at least biggest hobbies and interests, which I love, is human rights and protection of nature. And we're taking a really radical stance towards the protection of nature, because in Iceland, I don't know if you know, but there's a very beautiful nature, and it's been under the attack of big American aluminum companies which want all our energy, and instead we have to sacrifice unbelievable highlands, and it's a horrible story, I think. We built on the Bolivian and the Ecuadorian constitutions, which are really radical in the way that they protect the rights of nature for nature itself, not how can man use nature, but why should nature be a party that should be protected without any consideration into how we can benefit from it. So we wrote that in, and we said nature has a special right. It's the foundation of all life.
The second group were mostly talking about the system itself. That's the parliament and the ministers and the judges. They have been trying to increase the force of the parliament and try to do the parliament more independent from the ministers and from the judges. The third group, which I was a part in, it was about how to vote and democracy and foreign affairs. Our most important task was how to vote, and in Iceland we have political parties, but the voter, he has nearly nothing to say about who he will vote in the party. The party just hand us a menu and you have to take it all or nothing, and that was the main thing we would change, that the voters could pick up what meals they like best, and we will always see how we could pick a meal between menus that will say you could vote for one party or more parties, and also choose between candidates in different parties.
The ideas that we are putting forward in the new constitution is that 10% of the people can say no to any law from the parliament, 10% of the voters. And then it has to go into national referendum, so everyone gets to vote about it. And secondly, or thirdly, 2% of the people can present a certain issue on in the parliament. So if you get 2% of the voters to say we want to talk about animal rights, the parliament will have to take that matter. So we're really trying to put the power back into the hands of the people where it belongs. The biggest problem of our work is that we are a little bit stuck in the Montesquieu thinking that the power is three. It's like the legislation, the judges, and the government. So what I and more other people were saying is that we need to think about the power of wealth, how the power of wealth can influence the other governmental powers. For example, it can influence the people through the media. And so what we've done is we tried to figure out where the power lies with the power of wealth and with other official powers. So we put in an article saying that political parties could not accept more money than X, and they should always put their books open so you could know who is giving money to whom. Also with the media, the ownership of the media will have to be transparent and will have to be independent, so that wealthy people cannot own the media secretly and brainwash the public like has happened before.
The most difficult task to get one solution in was the researchers on the owner rights. For about 30 years ago, or 25 years ago, the fisheries, the right to fish around Iceland was given to only a few. And this has been sold and sold again. They who bought it, they of course don't want to hand it to the state. Most people are seeing better and better that if we just let all our researchers be in private ownership, we lose them. At the end we lose them and we never see them again. We did not focus so much on the crash or the money problem itself. We focused more on why it did occur. If you want freedom, you have to take the responsibility with it. But in Iceland there was freedom without responsibility. If you earned money, you put it in your own pocket. But if you lost money, you said, I'm sorry I can't pay, and the taxpayer has to pay it. And I think that's what we are trying to say no to. No thank you for this system. There is three possibilities now. One is that the new constitution will go to the people to vote on. I think this option is unlikely. Number two is that the parliament maybe do their own constitution, and then both of them will go to a referendum. Maybe that will happen. And the third option is that nothing happens. In fact, many senators in Iceland, they see this new constitution as their resignation paper. And that's why they will always be against it.
Political parties cannot decide to reduce the power of political parties. You can hear it's like physically impossible. So what's going to happen is that they're going to try. But I believe that if our ideas are good enough, they will conquer. That's the way things go. If this is a better constitution, the people of Iceland will demand it. And if they demand it, they will get it. That's the new lesson we've learned.
We've been waiting for this for almost 70 years. And every fourth year in new election, they promise a new constitution. And then after the election, they're like, we don't have enough time or money or some explanations about there's not going to be a new constitution. So we go to election again, and then they promise again. And this has been like this for almost 70 years. But now they have no way out. I can promise you that. There's no way out for them to let the people down.
What we've seen in the last decades is that we've moved a lot of the decisions that were made in the political field out into the economic field. We've privatized industry, we've privatized public services, we've privatized a lot of things that before were under the political field, where decisions were made by political representatives, which are now the decisions are made by those who govern or rule in the economic field. We expect the economy to grow every year, and the main issue of every economy is growth, that we need to grow. But infinite growth in a finite world is simply impossible. On current levels, the Western world is consuming many times the possibility for the Earth, our planet, and our resources to produce. We are consuming at a level that's unsustainable.
There is no power stronger in modern society than the power to create and issue money. Then we must consider who it is, which entities are creating the money, and not only creating the money, but issuing the money and allocating the money, deciding who gets a loan and at which interest rates. What we would like to see is that we would like to, for this tremendous power to be taken out of the hands of the bankers, to be brought back into the hands of government. What happens when all this new money gets created to cover the interest payments? This is actually what we call inflation. It is the inflation of the money supply. Basic fact is, in Iceland, only 2% of the money supply is actually created and issued by the central bank, which is run by the government. The remaining part, and the largest part of the money supply, is bank credit, which is created when a bank issues a loan. Credit is created in the system basically out of thin air. The top priority is the separation of investment banking and commercial banking. It's one thing when you have small deposits, which are ordinary people's savings that they may need to access to buy food and other necessities in hard times. But another thing is when you have certain extremely wealthy individuals, many of them who have become wealthy from financial operations themselves. Why should these deposits be covered in full at the expense of others that are perhaps not as well off? Another thing is that in order to provide this refinancing for the new banking system, the Icelandic government had no other option than to take on huge external debts. These debts can only be paid from taxes, from future taxes that will be eventually paid by myself, and others like me, and perhaps by my children, and even by their children. We really don't know today how long into the future it will take to repay all those debts. one of very strong points that have come through in our discussions in our group is that to have a better and healthier economic system that really serves the public needs and not private interests. It's probably best if everyone has access to information about almost everything. So why should there be secrets about an entity that is not a person? There's nothing personal about the business. It's just business, right? So why should there be any confidentiality? Wouldn't it be better if everything was out in the open?
Fact is, the Icelandic media doesn't talk about this. And I'm saying to people, this is no surprise to me. The Icelandic media does not talk about what's important for us people. They talk about what's important for them as owners, as greedy people. People who are power hungry, people who are running after money. They don't care about this. They want to silence this.
You know, they are not only taking the property from us, they are not only privatizing the banks, etc., you know, making it all this financial religion, but they are also taking the language. The politicians, the financial people, the lawyers, they were speaking a kind of a specific language, and they were ruling us with the language.
Freedom of information is gradually being chipped away from us, and we don't really know because it's done in such a way. I mean, like in the UK, you have super injunctions, you have out-of-court settlements, and the out-of-court settlements means that the news will never be told about, for example, unethical criminal behavior of the big corporations, and of course the corrupt politicians and the ties between these two entities. And the super injunctions means that if you as a journalist are placed under super injunction, you cannot tell that you can't tell the story, which is super censorship.
Nú rétt fyrir fréttir nálguðust fjölmennarsveitir uppreisnarmanna borgina óðfluga.
Orustan Trípóli hafin eftir hraða framsókn líbískra uppreisnarmanna sem náði í dag herstöðina.
So we need more intervention from the academic society in Iceland. We need more time for journalists in Iceland to dig deeply down into what's going on in the economic situation and feed the general public with better information than they do now.
It should be using the people. It should be like asking people to do like video blogs and showing them online and connecting to the technology and why shouldn't the people of Iceland who pay for all this, why shouldn't they be on some sort of a committee deciding what should be on television? Why is it just some random politically appointed people who choose that? I mean, sometimes night after night this is such shit, American soap operas and really bad stuff.
You're not going to change the world unless you change the way you do stuff. You as an individual, you have that responsibility. If you know about the crimes of Coca-Cola, you can't possibly allow yourself to buy Coca-Cola. Many people say, we can't stop using Amazon or PayPal or Visa or whatever because then we can't do things as we used to. Well, I got news for you. We're not going to be able to live in a world the way we used to because there's not going to be any planet left for the next generations. We're all going to have to do our part in changing our ways. Well, it started with this event, exactly this event. and it's Reykjavik Digital Freedoms Conference, and it was held at the University of Reykjavik on the 1st of December 2009. And I was invited to speak there, and Julian Assange and Daniel, at the time called Smith, now Domside Berg, were speaking on behalf of WikiLeaks. And they were discussing this idea that had actually been presented a year earlier by John Perry Barlow, the founder of the Electronic Foundation in the US, about taking the model of the tax haven, where, you know, if I want to start a tax haven tomorrow, I would pull together all the best laws in the world in order to create secrecy. Now, the idea that John Perry Barlow first provided here in Iceland was to create sort of Switzerland of bytes, where you could provide safe haven for freedom of information. We wanted to change or write or improve, upgrade 10 different laws in 4 different ministries. And so it would have been impossible because of the system we have and traditions for parliamentary laws not to be passed, or laws that are written by parliamentarians, and particularly from the smallest movements or parties. So we decided in collaboration with the staff here in the parliament to create a proposal tasking the government to do this task of changing 10 different laws or writing. For example, we don't have any proper whistleblowing legislation, which is critical for a small country like this. And to my amazement, somehow managed to get the entire parliament to agree to do this, including the government, the prime minister, and all the ministers that were present during this voting. I really call upon people to look at laws, not only information laws, but laws in general, and find to use the method and the way of the hacker. Okay, so like the hackers, they look at systems online, and they look for the weaknesses in the system. And sometimes they, by exposing it, sometimes in a very colorful way, they show the weakness, and then the companies responsible for the weakness can improve them. Or the hackers themselves, improve them. The good benefit of working with WikiLeaks at this time was that they had managed to evade both the lawyers from around the world that had threatened them and taken them to court. They had won all the court cases, and they've always managed to keep the information online no matter what. So they had the hands-on experience where the countries are actually functioning, where they're not just nice letters on a piece of paper.
And open courtyard. Yeah, roger. I just estimated there's about 20 of them. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Correction, Banner's 1-4, route 3-3. I don't know if that's... Hey, Bushman, Feldman, copy at White 6. That's a weapon. Yeah.
By doing what we're doing with IMI, it's not about making Iceland necessarily the best country in the world, but to set a standard. Because from my experience, I've been traveling all over the world to speak about freedom of information because of IMI, and of course because of my work with WikiLeaks. I was one of the core volunteers during the times of the collateral murder video, and I co-produced that. I feel that there is just so much need that we stay on top of things, and that we make sure that we have these pillars of democracy. If you don't have freedom of information, expression, and speech, you are not living in a democracy.
Keep shooting. Keep shooting.
For the time being, we do not have any civic rights with our information online, yet so much of our very personal information is now stored, and particularly in hostile countries like the US.
Those who control the society, they are very well organized. They have IMF, they have the World Bank, they have the European Union, they have NATO, OECD, everything, you know, this is like the clubs of the ruling class, you know. But when it comes to the people, the common people in Iceland and Portugal and Ireland and England or wherever we are, you know, we are very badly organized.
If we keep on with the system as it has been for the last years, then what we're going to be seeing is we're going to be seeing blood on the street. We're going to be seeing people killed. We're going to see real civil war. And I think that the people in power realize this, but they're still not, they definitely don't want to let go of any of their power.
There's only one thing that will scare the people who are in power enough to let them think they don't want to be in power anymore, and that's the threat of revolution. I'm sorry, but that's the only thing that worked here. It's like saying, okay, if you don't obey us, we are your employees. We are the one that pay your salaries. You are there as our servant. If you don't understand when we want you to leave or when we want you to do certain things, you will have to go. And if you don't want to go, we will carry you out. Simple. But that's the way it is.
The idea of a single person holding great powers in a democratic state is outdated. It's obsolete. We need to move the decisions to the general public and take powers from offices of single persons or a few persons.
What we decided was that we are not going to try to present some one silver bullet as a solution, but we would rather try to bring out many different ideas from what we had before.
It can be done. We have shown that it can be done. You can start with your two empty hands and just with a lot of force and people who are willing to volunteer. It is doable. You can do it in Portugal, you can do it in Rome, you can do it in Greece and everywhere.
We need to be thinking like what sort of society we want to be in like 50 years and in 100 years, not just like, okay, how can we put out the biggest fires now? But, you know, we need some sort of awakening.
It's very important that we also downgrade and downsize, not downgrade, that we downsize the system. Because both the corporations have become big and the systems, and it's become very difficult for people to influence their immediate sort of personal life. If people will feel an impact of what they do directly, that will inspire them to be more responsible civilians and participate in co-creating their own realities.
Those who think that the economy doesn't have to abide by the rules of democracy need to tell us why. Because we call ourselves democratic states, but most of the time in our workplaces, we are not part of a democracy, but simply part of a system where a few people have most of the power and make all the decisions.
Many of us believe that at this point in history, it is actually possible to bring on new ideas, new things, and reform without having to first get rid of the old things. Because what has happened is that the old way of doing things has mostly taken care of itself, and it is no more.
I mean, some of the left-wing parties are doing more right-wing decisions in some areas than the right-wing parties. And this is just a distraction. And the right-wing parties are doing the same. I mean, they're building huge systems. That is absolutely not right-wing from my cookbook. So maybe practical anarchism is the order of the day, where you at least provide the people with the tools and the inspiration to participate in their own societies and to understand that the society is them. It's not an external force, it's us.
Fighting for change is fun. It is fun, you know, when you meet up in a small room and maybe the roof is leaking and you're just trying to discuss your brainstorming about how you can do something without having anything to make something change. It's the most beautiful moments of life. So I don't understand when people say they are not interested in politics or in making a change. It's the most fun thing you can do.
I was always thinking about my kids and my grandkids. Do I want to leave this to them and tell them just to, have no future, just pay the bank's debts and, and just to realize this is life? No, this is not life, not for me. You can always hope for a better future. That's my message.
Freedom has the face of a human being. It's not a wool, black hood. That's not freedom. Freedom has the face of a human being. That's very clear to me. And a smiling one.